what happened was an AI came along with a goal of increasing the unit test coverage on this open source code base, and then it started to pay a bunch of people $10, $20 a time to go and take action in the real world. More people are going to be out of work. More people are going to be defaulting on mortgages. House prices start to crater because nobody can afford to buy anything because nobody's got salaries that they can then bet 30 years for these things. And I think that could be quite a dystopia for AI. First thing, buy Bitcoin, right? Don't buy it after the robots. Don't wait for the robots to take over and then adopt robot money. Buy the Bitcoin. Then if the robots take over, they're going to want the money from you. Now the robot's working for you. Right? If the robots get the money first, you work for the robots. That's not where you want to be.
Pete Winn, welcome to the show, mate.
Hey, mate, good to be here. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Hey, yesterday you sent me a message and you said, let's start the show like this. The business model of the century is to turn $10 into $50 of Bitcoin. Like, number one, hell yeah. How do we make this happen? And two, like, what the hell are you even talking about?
I know, it's cool, isn't it? It sounds super clickbaity. I've been working on my hooks to think about, okay, how do I make what I'm going to say more interesting? But I think the business model of last century was always how do you turn $10 into $50 and then keep doing it. I think the beauty of turning $10 into $50 of Bitcoin is if you can start doing that, then you can retire and then you don't need the business model anymore. But the way I think about this is it's really about buying some sort of productive asset and then doing something to it that can then increase the output and the amount of money that you can make quickly out of that asset and then moving it into Bitcoin. Now, this is a methodology I cooked up with my business partner that we call up, up, down. And so the idea is you want two things to go up and one thing to go down. We talk about productivity, capital, and risk. So productivity up, capital up, risk down. And the idea really came from, can we combine a few different technologies that we're really interested in around AI, Bitcoin, and Nostr in order to drive up productivity, drive up capital, and drive down risk? And then what does that look like when applied to a business? And so, yeah, that's the background for this is up, up, down. How do we increase the productivity in the business is the starting point. So as you hit on, AI is probably the best way to do this. We've got this magic thing happened a couple of years ago when we didn't used to be able to talk to computers, and then we could talk to computers, and that was just like, what the fuck? This is like an amazing thing that's just happened. And then about 20 minutes after that, everyone just went, oh yeah, we can talk to computers. Well, I guess there's no impact from that. And it's like, no, hang on. Like, this is huge. Because I think one thing that's misunderstood in the world is that like computers are already smarter than people in like so many different like directions. Like when it comes to maths, when it comes to memory, when it comes to just doing something very quick, you can operate on a different time scale. There are these sort of amazing things that can do like very specific things very quickly. And what they really suck at is like living in the generalized world of humans and like how we think and how we organize. And it turns out that if you can talk to a computer, you can more or less move from this like generalized human world of doing stuff into this structured computer world of doing stuff. And if you can do that reliably backwards and forwards, what you find is you can take a lot of things that we could do with humans and you can move them into the computer world and then just run a process very quickly. You could do sort of 10,000 years of work for free, like in computer world, and then pop back out of it and then talk to a human and then go back into computer world. And you can drive these like massive productivity improvements. It's a huge thing that we can now talk to computers that's been, as far as I can tell, just like grossly overlooked. And maybe we can get into more details later about that. But what occurred to me like a couple of years ago was just, this is going to be a massive productivity unlock. It's not going to look like ChatGPT. in the sense of it's not really going to be like a person just sitting here, like issuing commands out to a computer and getting them back. But what you should be able to do is to take a business and apply a sort of like Lean Six Sigma approach to the thing, where we say, okay, let's do some process standardization on this. Let's work out, how the business operates. What are all the different workflows? What are all the different processes? And then let's optimize all of those. But then instead of optimizing them into like human buckets of cognition, we have this new thing now where I can move into like a computer bucket of cognition and then go into computer world for a while and then come back out. So let's optimize those processes around using AIs to go AI native. And then instead of the human being like the main bottleneck that we push all that intellectual work through, let's do everything on the computer first and then just burst out to the human when we need them. And we can just pay them for specific tasks that we need. And then we come back into this like AI computer driven like workflow world. And if we do that, we should be able to bring costs down like quite immensely.
So is that what you'd call like an AI agent?
Sort of, yeah. I think that's the closest like terminology that's out there at the moment. I think generally when people talk about AI agents, they're almost talking about like the AI in if you imagine like the AI in a human skin, it's like a specific AI that does something a human can do, and you can drop it into your organization. So yeah, it's like instead of hiring Pete Winn, I hire Pete not Winn, who's an AI agent, and he just works 10,000 times cheaper. So, great. Pretty similar. Not as good looking, works harder.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to go for that.
No fresh haircut.
Yeah, okay. You got to have a fresh haircut for good A Bitcoin. That's what they say.
100%. Go on.
So yeah, so sorry, I was just going to say, so that's like kind of the first bit was like, okay, well that as the like an investment methodology, like, okay, well, what's the business that you might want? It's like, okay, well, if I could get a business and I can drop the costs quite significantly by automating it around AI, then fantastic. I can take something that I can buy it at a particular enterprise value. I can then just 5-10x that enterprise value through just optimization of the cash flow. So as long as I've got a cash flow in business, I can optimize the costs inside that business, and I could like 5-10x that business overnight in terms of enterprise value. But I can also then unlock a huge cash flow stream. Now, if I get that huge cash flow stream, I'm going to want to protect that cash flow into the future, because I'm effectively like pulling forwards from future competition, or the amount of money that I could have earned over the next 10 years. I'm just going to earn it all in the first year. So I may as well bank that and put it somewhere where it's going to grow. So I establish like a Bitcoin treasury off the back of that. And then I start effectively using these businesses to DCA into Bitcoin quite aggressively, where you could sort of buy a business at a particular multiple. You can almost pull out as much money in the first year. And then you get year on year, like that business just continues to buy you money into the future. So that would be the concept of the $10 investment buying you $50 of Bitcoin. Maybe it'd be more like, $250 of Bitcoin over a period of 5 years. But I think that's the goal.
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safe Dina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Dean, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safe Dina Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously G'day Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin way. So reach out to the Bitcoin way today. Like, I guess that's what we're trying to do with our organization, is to reduce the expenses. And I guess, like, just in our own personal situation, the 3 professional staff, all have doctor in front of their name. So the price tag is not cheap when it comes to fortnightly wages and stuff. How can that type of knowledge base and stuff be wrapped up into like an AI model and stuff? Or is it really like the lower order admin tasks and just data processing at this stage where you can use the AI to be able to save costs?
Yeah, so I think the answer is that, like, yes, there's a lot of stuff that doctors could do that you could probably move into the AI world, but there's probably a few other technologies you'd want to be thinking about alongside that. But to just give you some heuristics, so with my I have an organization in Australia called Other Stuff with my business partner, and we work with like a company out of the US called Stackwork, who've been doing a lot of business process automation for 4 or 5 years now, using Bitcoin to pay people for microtasks. And also they got in like quite heavily into the AI game a couple of years ago and building out these like agents and workflow driven automations. So I hooked up with those guys maybe about 5-6 months ago now, when I talked to the CEO, Paul, and I realized that like he had exactly the same sort of view of the future that I had, if anything, just better defined and better executed so far. As in, he was a good year ahead of me, and I thought, well, I should go and join you. And so together we've been looking at this sort of business model and trying to think through like, well, how do you take advantage of this? And like, what are the sort of heuristics for the type of businesses or the type of work that you can actually get this sort of return on? As you say, like, is it doctors? Is it like admin staff? Like, what is it that we're talking about? And it kind of comes down to, I'm going to go with 3 L's for this. I'm going to go language, labor, and load, which is, language is kind of like how much of your job can be defined around language as an input and an output of the job. So if somebody is taking in like sets of words or sentences or emails or anything that's defined, almost broadly speaking, of language, it could be code, it could be definitions of things, it could be documentation. But if that's your input, and your output also tends to be quite like intellectual and word based. So again, you're writing emails, you're talking to people, you're advising people, you're some sort of like, virtual like language based output, then you are a good target for AI based automation, because we can now talk to computers. That's one unlock there. The next one would be around like the labor. So the idea here is, do you have, let's say, 4 or 5 people in the organization that have the same job title? And if you do, like, what that gives us a clue to is that, like, all right, well, there's some standardization that's gone on here. So it's not that like there's one person doing completely unique work at a time. There's 3 or 4 different people. And that tells us that, like, okay, well, you've got several people doing the same thing. There's probably a role description. There's probably a process. There's probably, even if it's not written down, there's something here that is repeatable and could be mapped out at a low level. It's like, well, what cognitively is going on inside this person's head? What are all the little bits? And then can we take those and automate them? So if you've got, just go those 2 again, we've got like the language being like, how much of this is just language driven and how much of this is repeatable across, say, 2 or 3, 4 people. And then that's our first clue. And we would say there, if you've got those 2 things, there's a reasonable chance that we could probably take away about 80% of the work that's going on inside that process. And that's based off like data that has been gathered by like Stackwork over the last few years. So like this is quite, it's never 100%, we don't often come in and see a process, automate the whole thing, and then walk away with no humans in the loop. There's generally humans in there somewhere. They're often dealing with edge cases or something that's to do with the physical world for what you need. But if you had, say, 4 people in the same role, you might have 1 person in that role at the end of it, if that's the route that you wanted to go down. And then the final L that we had was around load, because I can't think of a better L term that works with the alliteration here. And that would be if you took that organization and there's processes in the organization that were heavily language and labor driven. Then the next question you would ask is, well, how much of that organization is defined by that process? So is this process like the core business process in this organization that accounts for like 80% of the cost base of the organization? That is going to be a fantastic target for automation. Like if it's just something on the side, if it's just part of the admin stuff, part of the support stuff that you don't really care about, and it's 10% of the cost base, but your real cost is that you pay Evel Knievel to jump over a flaming building, then let's I'm not automating that. That's not language and labor. So it's the fact that he could optimize his booking system, fantastic, but it probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think I need to talk with Stackworks because I'd say 80 or 90% of the tasks, at least for our organisation here, are definitely language and labour defined, and maybe to give like a bit of a context. Like a very little WordPress experience, very little knowledge. I'd never ever used an LMS, learning management system, and I just spent 6 to 8 hours a day just talking with ChatGPT and just getting it to be able to guide me and to be able to put this thing together. And I think what I achieved in 3 months without ChatGPT would have taken me 2 to 3 years if I was just to be able to look for Google, and YouTube videos to be able to do it. So that was really like my first focus 3 months of really talking with AI every single day. And it really compressed and catapulted. And then now I've started to play around with like giving the GPT like instructions and a knowledge basis and stuff. But the people that really have the language, the doctors in the organization are so busy at the moment, like just doing the next thing, that they currently don't have the time or the capacity to be able to provide me the training instructions, I guess, because they've got the knowledge base. So I don't actually know how to do it. So I guess that's the next step. But you're saying like it's not just Chat GPT and it's not just like AI agents. What other type of tools out there and is looking into? Like you mentioned about like email and stuff. Like if someone could just, like if an AI could take care of my email would be great. We're like paying somebody else to take care of email and put them into different folders and respond to people and flag things for me to action or to go out to different people or to be able to review. Are the tools good enough to be able to start to respond on your behalf and do those things, or not quite yet?
I mean, that's the meme, right? It's the guy that's like, I took these 3 bullet points and I turned it into this long, complex email so I look smart. And then the receiving end, there's a woman there and she says, I took this long, complex email and I boiled it down into these 3 bullet points so I could read it. You're just like, I mean, that's certainly possible. Like, it's really what you're doing is asking the AI to make a decision about something and then take an action. And certainly inside something like email, as long as there's like an API that you could talk to where you can provide like a structured output that just says like, okay, here's an email ID and here's the action that I want to take, send it to this API, and then that will happen and it will go in the right folders. That's all there. That's probably just something that needs to be built. And for me, I wouldn't worry about something like that because I would just go, right, that's going to be such it's just an open goal for somebody like Google or Gmail or for Exchange to just add that in, that I expect that'll just come at some point as an add-on, and people will get something like that. The sort of tool that interests me, like one of the ones that again I don't know if this is how much of this was like pure serendipity, but when I first learned about Stackwork, it was probably back in 2021. And one of the things that they were doing at the time that I found very interesting is they were building these large public knowledge graphs under a project that they had called Second Brain. And the idea was could they, instead of them listening to every podcast on Bitcoin in the world, could they just have some sort of workflow going through transcribing podcasts about Bitcoin, pulling out all the individual terms, and then using humans to help classify all these terms and build effectively a machine readable knowledge graph of all the information about Bitcoin. And they started doing this years ago. This has been building ever since. And the way they do it is that you pay a Lightning invoice to put something into the graph, and you pay a Lightning invoice if you want to get data out of the graph. So it can all be public and spam proof. It's available on the internet. It's quite interesting. But what a knowledge graph, it turns out, gives you is almost the best memory system for an AI agent, for an LLM to understand. So, because knowledge graphs particularly have a few, I guess, kind of important nuances to how they can retain and give you information, which is that they have implicit inheritance across different entities. So if you could imagine the way a lot of memory systems or retrieval or search systems are done in AIs at the moment is they use something called RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, it's the equivalent of, I'll say one more step back, then I'll finish that sentence, right? So when you ask a question to an LLM, like a standard ChatGPT 3.5, it's more or less asking a highly impulsive child, what the answer is. You ask a child and you say, what's this? And they go, it's 27 billion. They don't know. Yeah. They just say it. They just say whatever is most appropriate that they think to say back. And ChatGPT was doing that in 3.5. It was just yeah, I'm going to say some stuff. And if it knew the thing, great. If it didn't know the thing, didn't matter. It's saying it anyway. Just like a 10-year-old.
And it sounded like it knew.
Yeah, exactly.
So
no, just full confidence, full bore, it's 27 billion. You say, how do you know that? And it says, I just said it. All right, cool. You're a 10-year-old. I get it. That's good. One of the quick fixes for that was you use something called RAG, and what that does is it's like the LLM goes and reads a book before it answers. Or maybe a better analogy is it's you read the book and then you tell the LLM. So what sort of happens behind the scenes is you have a question that comes in and it says something where's the next Bitcoin Bush Bash being held? And instead of it just blurting out an answer, it's what really happens is your question goes in, where's the next Bitcoin Bush Bash? And then it's you go over to the side and you go, it's in Beechworth. And then he just goes, oh, it's in Beechworth. And you're oh, cool. Right, that's the answer. And what's happened behind the scenes in the code is it takes that question that you had, it runs some maths on it so it can look up the answer in a particular style of database. And it just goes and gets a bunch of content that describes that answer and gives it along to the LLM as well. So what it sees is, where's the next Bush Bash? By the way, it's in Beechworth. And then it goes, right, well, the correct answer to this is it's in Beechworth, and it sends it back to you. Now, that's pretty good. And it's pretty good on short forms of text that you can go and get here's all of the text over here. And then it dumps it into the context of the conversation you're having with the AI. Now, a problem with that is when there's got to be a lot of implied context inside a conversation. So if I'm talking about it, in this context, you might be well, you say, well, when's the next one? And you say, the next what? And I say, I don't know. And so what you need to know is when you're referring to a particular thing or a particular entity that's at a particular time, you kind of need to know all the metadata that's associated with that. So inside a graph database, we can deal with this through inheritance structures. So we could say if there's a particular term in a contract or something like that we needed to look up, it's very important when we say the end date of this is December the 30th. We need to know all the other metadata that's associated with that contract. And we would do that by mapping out all of the entities inside this contract and then all of the different connections between those entities, all the metadata associated with that. And then we can pull a highly dense set of information back into the context window for the AI and just provide it in terms of giving it an answer. So that's the other piece that I find quite quite interesting and very powerful in this space for these AI agents is like, how do you give them both like the best memory in the world, which is just build everything that you hear into a knowledge graph and correctly classify it. And then the best recall system in the world, which again is like recall from knowledge graph using something called GraphRag. So that's come up in a lot of the research space, has got really interested in this concept of GraphRag over the last probably about 6 to 9 months. Like there's a few preprint papers that came out about it, but I think you'll see it more and more. The interesting thing with Stackwork is just that they happen to be working on this back in 2021. So there's the pretty advanced tech that they've got there to integrate with the workflows. The other bit I might add, for you mentioned about, is it agents? Is it about tools and all this sort of stuff? And I say that my view of agents is just this. The assumption that's made with agents is like the human is the right level for the AI. And I kind of get it, because we're all people. So it's very easy to look at it and go, it's intelligent. It's intelligent like us. The correct size of this thing is probably human sized. But I think that's probably incorrect. I think it's both bigger and smaller, in the sense that I think the right organizational like size for an AI in my head is probably a business. It's like a small organization of people, and that organization is effectively like a lot of just automated workflows that would exist and run, and that describes like what this virtual entity that is a business is trying to achieve. And then I think there's the smaller aspect of that, which is that inside that virtual business there's lots of individual tasks and individual bits of cognition that, again, we used to group together into a human and say, you're the manager of this, or you're the doer of that. Like that is going to get pieced apart into sort of like 10,000 individual steps.
Yeah. Sort of just today, actually. So like what happens is the organization will send me a list of their staff, basically, with a couple of fields that they've pulled out. And then I copy those fields, but then I paste it into like a CSV form, and then I need to make sure that there's no errors on the CSV form. And then I upload it to the LMS system, bulk import it, and then it'll automatically send out the emails and stuff. But talking with ChatGPT, I was like, can you do this? Can a robot do this? It's like AI, can they just do this? And it's starting to show me that they can just fill out a Google form or a Google sheet. They can put their information in there, because I only want them to fill out 4 boxes out of the 8. And then that'll go on to like a master list for their organization. And then all I need to do is push a button, download it, and then I can go into the LMS and then import it, and then it will do the rest. So there's like, I'd need to push a button, which would download it. And then I need to upload it. I need to push import, confirm import, and then it would do the rest. And then I was like, can you do all of it? And it's like, yes, you can set up these like automation triggers and stuff. So when it comes in, it automatically goes over, it'll fill it out, it'll do everything. And that's sort of where I got to by the time I had a meeting this afternoon. Nice. But I was like, it sounds confident. Whether it actually happens or not, I haven't tried it yet. But like, it's like, yes, you can do this. I'm like, great, because this takes up so much time. Is that like how you're starting to see it? It's like, so that's one process that I need to do, like sort of day in, day out, part of many. And I can just be like, all right, like you do all the hard work for me, sorting it out, removing the errors, the spaces after the name, things like that, malformed email addresses. And then I just need to quickly check it and then import it. And then, so that's one task, and then do it for another and another and another. Is that sort of the way that you envision AI scaling the business?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can. And I think you're hitting on maybe even like a broader topic there, which is that a lot of what you're discussing in that example is not so much that you would need an AI to do it, but it's always been something, maybe even for like the last 20 years, that you could have probably automated using code. It's just the barrier to entry to automate that using code might have been 50 grand or like 100 grand. Yeah. And you wouldn't go, well, I'm not gonna hire a software developer for that. That's insane. Like the step change of like having that software available to me, it's just not worth it. So then your next best question was like, has anyone built like a SaaS product or that I can use that does exactly this? And generally the model with SaaS is not to do exactly what you want, but to do something that's quite common. And usually what you really want is exactly what you want. Like it's that last 10%, which is just almost all of the effort and value. So it's not worth doing it that way. And then you fall back on like the manual labor component of it. I think what we're going to see is that the introduction of AIs, the thing that they're good at is language. And the thing about code and like development of code is that coding is highly structured language. And it kind of stands to reason, right, that a language model is going to be even better at highly structured language than it is at language. And so you very quickly see that you can use these things to start becoming like doing your own coding, building your own applications that do almost exactly what you want. And people are doing this and at a level where they already get exactly what they want for a task that they would never have considered getting somebody else to code up for them in their life. Like I was like this. I've spent about, I'm somewhat technical in like mindset, but I've never been a developer or a coder. I'm just not oriented correctly around the detail and the syntax and the language. And I've spent about 20 years, every couple of years going, right, no, this year I'm going to learn to code. And then a month later, I don't. I just go, sorry, this is just too difficult. It's not me. I'll do the other thing. Until last year. And the big breakthrough last year was using the AI to guide me through that learning experience and to teach me how to code. And then within 2 weeks, I'd cracked it. And I was just writing like applications for myself to do all the things that have always bothered me. It's what I've always wanted to be able to do and never been able to crack. And the difference was having this like patient teacher that could give me examples that are exactly in context of what I'm doing inside the code. Like, so the description for this would be something like, previously when you learned to code, what you would do is you would start doing like an activity that you're learning from, and then something would go wrong or not quite work, and you would Google the answer. And you'd say, like, how do I do this? And you'd get something that's a description that looks kind of like what you want, but it's maybe like 50% right. And there's a bunch of stuff that's implied that it's not told you that you don't know yet, or there's something missing. And you could spend weeks trying to like just get over this like one roadblock. And you just have no momentum and you get rid of it. It's like what you said earlier about with WordPress, right? You say it might have taken you 2 years. The chances is you probably just would have done something else instead because it's just not worth that much time to you. But when you hit a roadblock with AI and you say, okay, well, here's the problem that I've got. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's exactly the error that I've got. And it gives you back like this highly contextual answer that says, that error means this. This is where the error is. The reason you've got this error is this, this, and this. Here's the fix. And you go, I understand that. And all of a sudden, like your momentum is that you hit these you're still hitting all the same roadblocks, but you clear them like within minutes. And you get such like a head of steam up that you're just like, oh my God, I can do it. And then it seems like with anything that you learn, as soon as you get there, it's amazing. Like I haven't used this for languages yet because it's probably going to be a bit pointless by the time I actually get around to learning a language. I'll just stick an earbud in, it'll probably work. But it's just like it's amazing for learning. I think that's a huge unlock.
I think it's really incredible. And like we started off the conversation turning $10 into $50 in Bitcoin. And like I want to keep diving down that rabbit hole. So you said there's 3 things, AI, Bitcoin, and Nostr. But before we get that, the last time I saw you, Pete, was at Cheat Code in Sydney. And you gave a talk. You're on the stage. And you're a panel. I've got
memorabilia sat around on the desk.
Man, that was just such a epic week. You know, the conference lasted a day, well, sort of the day and a half, but to be there for a week, it was just so it was one of the greatest weeks of my life. I just urge anyone to go along to the conference. Yes, you're going to hear the same people speaking, maybe about the same stuff. Great, like put that aside. It's about the networking and the community and the connections and the interactions and just being around Bitcoiners. That's what I find so valuable about it. But in regards to your talk, you're talking on AI, and I can't remember exactly what you were saying, but the feeling that I left with was like, oh shit, AI is going to take over. It's going to be dystopian. We need to watch out for it. And like everyone's going to lose their jobs, and it's going to just be complete chaos. So I don't know if that's what you're saying, but that's the feeling I had, that if people are not paying attention, they're not learning these tools and they're not front running it, AI is going to front run them. And a transition period could be very, very difficult. So before we get into continuing the conversation of $10 to $50 in Bitcoin, what are some of the areas where AI could maybe not turn out so great, or areas that people should really be focusing at the moment to front run whatever could potentially play out?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think I'm quite like a techno optimist in this sense that I think AI is going to be largely good, but it's not that I think it's going to be good and that there's not going to be huge impacts that could leave a lot of people
actually
in
just
a bad way.
I remember what you said. You said you had like 3 to 5 years to be able to 3 to 5 years to be able to get rich, and then like that's it. It was like so close along those lines.
It was something like that. I think it was in the evening before I was talking to Danny, and then I think he mentioned it to Pete, and it became the first question of the panel, which I said, it was a throwaway statement. I said, you've probably got about 5 years to make as much Bitcoin as you can, and then it's kind of game over at that point. And the idea is that at that point, it's going to be hard. It might get hard to be able to find things to do for money. Like in the sense that if you've got an army of AIs that can do a lot of the intellectual jobs that we already have, then you might find it hard to get money. Like if there's physical jobs that the AIs can't do, and we're in the period where we don't have robots yet, that's great. But everybody else that also used to have like the intellectual jobs is also out of work and looking for those jobs as well. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more things done with a lot less people for like a particular unit of output. I mean, what I really think is that productivity goes up massively and we're all good. But it's never clear in that environment. Like how do you imagine all the jobs that we can't imagine right now because we just don't have the capacity to do them? It's like, all right, well, I'm not like getting a foot massage in a theme park on Mars, so we've still got that to do. Receipts give you cancer. Like that needs fixing. So who's focused on that? Or no one? Like, let's go and sort that out. There's a lot of stuff in the world to deal with that we're not doing. So I'm sure there will be work to do. It's the bit that I get is I just don't know how you compete with this army of robots that work for near zero, particularly if you've got like an intellectual job. Now, if I was going to have like more of a doomer view on this, I would actually think that the world where we've got such good AI that the cost of doing everything comes down so low that everything becomes almost negligibly cheap and simple to achieve, that should be like a utopia for the world, right? That's a good thing. Prices come down, everything gets cheaper, nothing's hard to do. Right, fantastic. And I think the real problem that we've got is how you make that transition. And this is, like Jeff Booth's thesis around like deflation versus inflation and the reaction of the governments here is just, it's not obvious that the world that we're in at the moment, that's built around inflation and that is built around like debasement of money and assets going up in price and salaries going up, is going to jive very well with a massively deflationary world where prices come down and salaries come down. And so, like, this is good A Bitcoin. It's not yeehaw Bitcoin, right? So if we take an Aussie slant for a minute, like the Australian economy is just, it's houses, right? It's like there's mining, oil and gas, and then there's houses. And I think they do some finance or something over in Sydney and people in Melbourne like to pretend they're on the telly. And then that seems to be the whole like economy in this country sometimes. And the thing about houses is like a house is just a 30-year bet that your salary never goes down for a lot of people, right? Like it's I'm going to take out an amount of money that is just so much more money than I could possibly justify given my current salary. But history tells me that my salary goes up over time because of nominal inflation of the money supply, and the price of the house goes up over time. So I can probably take out that ridiculous bet. Like I don't think mortgages exist in kind of a non-fiat world. But it's still a bet that requires you to pay principal on that mortgage, which itself has gone up massively for a lot of people. It's like what we went from like 2 to 5, 7% or something at the moment. So you might be like 3 times on your mortgage what you took it out for 5 years ago. So if you're, the price that you're paying for your house has gone up 3x and you weren't banking on that, that's going to be a huge impact to people. And we see a lot of people under stress there. I think the next thing is that then you would look at like people losing their jobs. So let's say you could take a business that employs 100 people and do the same amount of output with 20 people. Well, it might not be that 80 people get released from that business, because you might actually just drive so much more productivity and output that you just grow the business massively. But it could come down to, say, 50. So 50 people lose a job out of the 100, 50%. Well, like that's for those 50%. It's not like they went from earning this much to earning this much over time, and it's nicely smoothed out. It was a cliff. They just went to zero. So now it's down to, well, whatever savings you've got and what are the new jobs that you could get. Well, if we're in a world where we're actively reducing the amount of people that we need in particular industries and jobs and new work, like whilst we're like, well, if we're just doing this broadly across the world, then broadly across the board, what you've got is people losing their job and finding it much more difficult to find their next job, which is going to then put downward pressure on salaries. So salaries go down at the margins. More people are going to be out of work. More people are going to be defaulting on mortgages. House prices start to crater because nobody can afford to buy anything, because nobody's got salaries that they can then bet 30 years for these things. And I think that could be quite a dystopia for AI, which is that just it's going to become so much cheaper to deliver stuff. And I think it will move quicker than we can deal with the consequences of this and find new work and new jobs. That I really think you might have a bit of a trap where a lot of people that believe they are very secure in their jobs and they believe that they can afford everything that they have in terms of debt, find out that they can't very quickly, and that they never actually owned any of it. They didn't own their house. They just had a 30-year mortgage. They don't own their car. They just have like a couple of cars that have got financing deals over 5 years. And this was all stuff that they could service. They could always service the debt on it until they lose their jobs. And I think if you had like a dad in a family loses a job, a mum in a family loses a job, all of a sudden, a lot of people can be quite stressed. There's a lot of people in Australia where they need both parents in work to finance these things. And like I think that's like a huge danger. That would be the big risk to me. Is I think the world where everything's really cheap is probably pretty good. I think now, like, we know how it all works. I think there's this like 3 or 5 year transition period where all hell could break loose. Like a lot of things could go wrong in that period of time. And I think it's likely to happen because the amount of money that's available from taking, if you've got a business that costs $100 million a year, so you're producing $100 million a year in revenue, you've got a $90 million a year cost base. And if you could buy that business for, let's say, 5 times earnings at $50 million, right? If you could reduce the cost base of that business by 50%, which is not unreasonable, then all of a sudden you can almost like pay back that entire purchase in the first year. So you're going to make your $50 million back in the first year. You're probably paying it off over several different years. So all of a sudden in year one, you've put down almost like your first $10 million and you've made $50 million of Bitcoin. Like, who isn't like, that's going to happen? Like, this isn't something that like just Pete Winn is talking about. Like, it's not just something that, like, I'm talking with Paul about. Like, we know of many investors and like many large like capital allocators and pots of money that have glommed onto this strategy, and they're looking at it and thinking, that's a lot of money to be made there. And the incentives all align that it's very likely to happen. And the output of it is it's going to just crush the costs and the revenues of these businesses over time. So the price of everything is going to come down, and it's going to feel good on one side, unless you're banking on your capacity to be able to work for the next 10 years. That would be the bit that I think is hard. Now, and this might be easier for someone like yourself, right? Which is the answer to that is probably you need to be thinking about entrepreneurship. You need to be thinking about, right, well, if the jobs that are there at the moment go away, it doesn't mean that like human capacity to want stuff goes away. There's always going to be something that you can do. It just means that you need to be thinking about like, what is that unmet need? And like, how can I provide for that? Then the other thing that you could do is just to buy Bitcoin, because like that would be that's my general like first port of call with most people. It's like, all right, what's the impact of AI? This sounds quite hard. What do I need to do? And it's like, all right, first thing, buy Bitcoin, right? Don't buy it after the robots. Don't wait for the robots to take over and then adopt robot money. Buy the Bitcoin. Then if the robots take over, they're going to want the money from you. And now the robot's working for you, right? If the robots get the money first, you work for the robots. That's not where you want to be. So go buy your Bitcoin, and then we'll deal with the rest of it. But it's the transition, I think, is the scary bit.
It's going to be like an interesting couple of years, and just like even how quick, ChatGPT is the AI that I've played around with the most, like how quick it's developed and image generation. Like the other day I had 12 pages of notes, and I just took photos, put it in there and said, can you turn this into like a to-do list or a list for me? And it grouped everything. Like it's getting so quick, but it'll be interesting what happens in the next 5 years, and Elon and his humanoid robots and things like that. So Nostr, like how's Nostr come into this? Like Nostr's the social media for like the social media of Bitcoin, basically. If maybe you've got a better way to be able to phrase it. I've signed up, I've jumped on there, I've put a couple of posts, I've found it not as dopamine rewarding as X, and potentially, and maybe this is just my skill set, but not persevering enough to be able to curate my feed to get the information that I want, where X has done that really, really well, even though there's like so much just noise and just shit. It's just it's a cesspit, like a lot of the time, mixed with some high signal conversations in there. But like in saying that, I think it's still like early infancy, but there is like none of the noise on there. And the few posts that I interact with, that of the people that I've managed to connect with, putting in their is it their NPub, like putting in their key. So I'm like following them direct. I get served their signal direct, but that's sort of like all that's been served to me, and I'm not really going outside that circle. Two questions, like where's Nostr like in its journey of development, and then like how's Nostr AI Bitcoin work together?
So quick, like what is Nostr, I guess would be, so Nostr is an acronym, stands for notes and other stuff transmitted via relays. So that is part of why the company I was building in Perth is called Other Stuff. We were aligning with the things you could build on top of Nostr. Now, what that is almost like a different way of building applications. So if you could think something like Facebook is a particular application that exists on the internet. And the way it works is that you have a web browser or an app on your phone, and then it talks to a big computer that Mark Zuckerberg keeps under his bed. And Mark Zuckerberg keeps a big computer under his bed, and he has all your data in it, and he has all your mum's data in it, and all your grand's data in it, and he just like sits and hugs it at night so he can go to evil sleep.
Rocking.
That's what's going on there, yeah, right? That's one way of building applications, is we can do that. We can put all the data in Mark Zuckerberg's bed, or in like Jeff Bezos's shed, or like wherever they keep all these computers.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an option. Like another way we could do it is that we could keep all of the information on your phone. And like that's kind of nice, because then all the information's on your phone and your mum's phone and your grand's phone. But then you end up in this massive like coordination problem of like, okay, well, if we're trying to build something where we all talk to each other or interact around the same data, how do I know what you've got and how do you know what I've got? And that's the other end of this scale, which is all peer-to-peer stuff. So if you ever hear Tether talk about like hole punch and pair network and all this sort of stuff that they're doing, that's kind of like that end of the scale, which is like everything's on the phone, everything's in under Mark Zuckerberg's bed. And then somewhere in the middle here, closer to the everything's on the phone model, is Nostr, where you can build an application that says, right, most stuff, all the information that you're looking at, you've got a copy of. But what we're also going to do is we're going to pass it around. We're going to have this network of relays. So this is the transmitted by relays part. That all they do is that they're just dumb. Like we just put stuff on the server and the server sends it around and copies it, and then it'll give it you back if you ask about it. That's all the server's going to do. Like the difference with some of the Facebook model over on this side under his bed is that, you know, it's not dumb. Like everything's done on the server. Like all you're doing is having a look at what you're allowed to see from the server. You can't just pull information out. You can't like merge it around yourself. You can't walk away with it. All the information stays there, and you just get to have like a peek in at your information. On something like Nostr, all the information would live on your phone, and we use these relays as kind of a coordination layer, so we all see the same things. So it's a way of building apps that's a bit more open and allows people to build quite interesting experiences that are like native to the individual. And so something like social media works for that, because I could have like my newsfeed, like when you look at your newsfeed in Nostr, like it's in the browser or it's in the phone. Like you scroll through it and it'll just go and get updates from the server, and it just push them down, and you can get it from one server, you can get it from 20 servers, like however you want it to work. So it's a bit more robust around like who can stop you getting access to information. But the reason that's quite cool is that it's open. Like, you know, it's just we don't need the server to do anything fancy, so it can be quite cheap to run. It can be quite open. People can just publish whatever they want, and then when we publish stuff, we sign it all. And so we use like cryptography, and we say, all right, this is Pete talking on Twitter. If I'm going to talk on Twitter, I go into like Elon Musk's shed and I write down like what I want, and he either says I can send it or can't send it or whatever. But you don't actually know that was me. Like there's no, it's probably coming from my Twitter account, but it could have been him as well. He could have popped in there and just thought out a cheeky tweet. Like much worse if he does it for the president or whatnot. And we've seen, you know, obviously presidents get taken off these platforms, so there is real risk there. In Nostr, it's a little bit different. Is to get a message out there that comes from me, I have to cryptographically sign it, and you know that only I could ever have sent that message and put it on that network. Now, once it's out on the network, sorry, you go.
Just on that, like you're saying, only you or somebody that has access to your phone or your account, but they have to physically be in your account.
If they've got your private key, it's just like with Bitcoin, right? If they have their private key, they're you, right? The same way that if they get the private key to your Bitcoin, they've got your Bitcoin. If they get the private key to your Nostr account, they've got your identity. Now, that private key could be in an application on your phone, in which case, if they get your phone, then that they've got access to that. It could be encrypted on the phone and you have like a passcode, and then there's a different way of doing it. But effectively it means that the owner of that private key sent that message. But it's almost the only way we have in all communication networks of actually just getting some like verifiable identity of who this is from in the first place, right? This is what we use cryptography for. But it means that this is a social network now where we can post all of these messages and all these updates, and we can know exactly who they've come from. And so we can start to build this kind of like web of trust that like, that private key public key is effectively Pete. And so I can see all of this information coming from Pete. All right, that makes sense. That's Pete. If he goes and signs something else, then we can see that's also a message from Pete. That doesn't exist in Twitter world. Now, that could be interesting from like a deep fake point of view, coming into the AI world, where if I'm going to generate like a video of, yourself doing something untoward with a duck, right? Like if I can sign that with your private key saying, oh yeah, this is me, like, guys, no judgment, this is just what I'm doing these days, like, leave me to it. Then if that's signed with your private key, people are going to look at that and go, Sean, all right, let's maybe we don't invite him to all the parties anymore, but he's going to do what he's going to do. If it goes and it's signed by my private key or just some random private key, you'd be like, oh, that's probably a deep fake that Pete's done because he's playing with him. We remember that episode that went out where he said he might do that, so that makes sense. So that's an option, like, of how it dovetails quite nicely with AI. But I think that's coming, and this is going to be like a major problem on the internet. It's going to be like, how do you know the veracity and the provenance of what you're looking at, and that it isn't just somebody else taking the piss? I mean, or being nefarious. And you see this with Twitter bots all the time, right? Like, here's a Twitter bot. Like, is it me or not? Is it Preston Pish or not? I mean, like, part of that comes from context, part of it doesn't. Like, how do you establish those identities? On Nostr, that's just a solved problem. We don't have it anymore because we know that it's signed by the correct private key. And then it just becomes a question of how do you get everybody to understand that private key, which is a web of trust thing, which is slowly getting built up on Nostr. So that's a great thing about Nostr. Now, what I really think it means is that over like a 5 to 10 year period, as Nostr becomes more of a marketplace for exchanging different types of information, where you understand like the provenance of that thing and whether it's important. So let's say you were like an AI agent or like a full AI business, like you were effectively an AI, but your job was to do copywriting services for anybody that asks, and you'll just take payment in Bitcoin. A great place to advertise that service would be on Nostr, because you could advertise all of the work that you've got on Nostr. You could advertise the payments that you're making. You could advertise the incomes, the outgoings, like whatever, like the proof of the work, the testimonials. So you could like map that back to individual people, and you could build this whole reputation system inside Nostr so that people know that, like, okay, well, that service there is real, does exist, has done these things, and I can prove all of that using cryptography so that I can have like a verifiable identity. This isn't just somebody, like, I don't know, just building a website with a lot of testimonials on it that says they've done these things, right? This is real social proof now. So I think you'll see a lot of
That's
like
incredible.
What might have been like other social proof systems move into being, cryptographically verifiable social proof, and that will become just desired in a world where you've got huge amounts of fakes.
Yeah. And like, obviously Bitcoin's going to be the payment rail for these, and Bitcoin's like natively and built on like built into Nostr or natively compatible. Like, is Lightning the next option? Is it scalable enough to be able to do it? Or like, how's, I guess the question that I really want to know is, I believe Bitcoin is the best money. It's the best store of value, and machines are going to want the best form of money, which is Bitcoin, but they're probably not going to get it on the base chain. They're not going to get micropayments on the base chain. So how do you see like the bots in whatever capacity receiving Bitcoin?
Yeah. I mean, so there is an interesting like case in point here is that like so one of the things that I do with Stackwork is I'm developing their like software development methodology and platform for like how we deliver all the rest of our software products that we need to build. And that's built around the idea that we're not going to have any software engineers. So I've got a software product that I'm delivering, and I don't have any engineers that I work with. It's just sort of me directing it with a fleet of like AI agents to support me. We call this thing like Hive. And what we do is I will bounty out tasks to individual like software developers to complete work, submit PRs, and start building this open source repository that we've got. And then that deploys new features for me. Now, those right now, a lot of those tasks is what will happen is I will sit down, think through a feature, think what I want to try and achieve, write out the description of the thing, like build out the product, like the requirements, the definitions, the test criteria and everything, and then slowly build it out into a set of like 20 tickets that go out that get completed. And as they get completed, it builds the feature. I'm building tools to make that whole process much easier. So you don't have to be me to do it. You can just be anybody else. And then much quicker so that we can just get so much more software developed, so much cheaper and so much easier that it gives us an advantage like internally inside the team. Now, I bring that up because one of the things that I have an AI agent do, so it's another colleague of mine, Tom, developed this, where we have an agent which will look at our code base, and our code base exists in a graph, so we can understand the code base very nicely. We can see all the different relationships between all the different functions, and we can very quickly figure out like what's our unit test coverage across this code base. And it might be at like 40%, which would be very normal. And we say, well, it'd be better if it was 100%, because then we're going to pick up on changes that kill this project quicker. So we don't make one change and it knackers everything else. And then we spend a week trying to figure out what went wrong, right? So we want 100% test code coverage. And so we click a button and this agent runs and it goes and figures out, okay, well, where are we missing test code coverage? And it goes, okay, well, for this function that needs test code, it calls another agent that goes away and writes a test for that. And it says, okay, well, here's my target. Here's my test to do this. And then now really what I need to do is get that into the code base. But the test might be wrong. So it'd be useful to get a human to look at that. So what we do is we use our bounty system to then go, all right, well, another agent's going to come along and it's going to look at the target. It's going to look at the test that you've already written. So it's like 80% done. And it's going to create a bounty for the last bit of work. It would be anywhere between $10 and $20 currently. And it goes up onto this public notice board, and then bounty hunters come in and say, oh, I'd love to do that. And they assign it. And they pick it up, they look through the test and go, that's fine. Copy, paste, bang, done. Go to GitHub, merge a pull request, submit. And then now I've got a unit test that's just appeared out of nowhere that was dictated by these agents. I would come along or somebody else would come along, and we're going to be automating this soon as well. And you review everything, make sure it's okay, hit merge, it's done. Now, the interesting thing about that process is that I didn't set any work in that process. What happened was an AI came along with a goal of increasing the unit test coverage on this open source code base. And then it started to pay a bunch of people $10, $20 a time to go and take action in the real world. So there's like real humans hitting keyboards to log in and create pull requests on GitHub and submit them in order to get those payments through. And that's kind of nuts, right? This is AIs paying humans, and they do it using Bitcoin. So I was talking about this on Twitter recently, and someone's going, no, this is never going to happen. It's going to be some bullshit coin. They said, it's like, well, it is going to happen. It's going to happen on Bitcoin. It'll never work. And I was like, well, source, like I do it like 50 times a day. Like, I don't know. Yeah. What do you want? It's here. The future's here. It's just not distributed to you yet. That's fine. So I think yes, I think computers will use Bitcoin because they can. It's just there. There's no debt. It's finally settled. So Lightning gives you the opportunity to finally settle Bitcoin in milliseconds. So that is useful enough to computers. The scale question.
Sorry, maybe I think you're probably going to get into it. So I'll hold my question. I'll let you answer.
All right. So I was going to say the scale things is like that's where the nuance comes in. It's like, well, how can we do this now? Yes. Like, can we do it in the future? Yes, probably. Like, what are the total costs of doing something like this? Is where you bring in like a little bit of the nuance. So if we take something like the Lightning Network, for the Lightning Network to work, you do need base chain transactions to refresh and manage your Lightning channels, and they will happen like at a period of there'll be, let's say you might make 20 base chain transactions a year or something like that. And now the cost of those base chain transactions these days can go anywhere from like 1 cent to $200. And so the question of like how well Lightning works is, well, how much value are you moving around for your Lightning channel, given the fact that you're going to have to pay like a maintenance charge here of anywhere between like 1 cent and $200 10, 12 times a year. So usually when everybody shits the bed about Lightning, it's because currently like opening and closing a channel will be $200 and they'll say, oh, well, it's impossible. Like nobody can ever use this. I can't pay $200 for a cup of coffee. And you say, well, that's not what you're saying is that, like, let's say I'm refreshing my channel once a year. Like, have I bought enough stuff that $200 is kind of the aggregate fee of every other transaction that I've done in that time? It scales up to that level at the moment. Now, for a business, if we would push like hundreds of thousands of dollars around online, various payments to pay people for this sort of stuff. And any specific payment that we might make could be like $1. We also have like Stackwork have another program where they work with stack workers that do microtasks on phones. That would be things like, okay, well, I will supplement like an image detection app by checking in like, okay, is that a corner? Is that a dog? Is that a cat? Is that a budgie? Like, these are tasks that people would do, and you might just get paid anywhere from like 10 cents to $1 for one of these tasks, and they're all paid instantly. And so we can do an awful lot of instant settlement, but we then carry to like the whole batch cost of managing that Lightning infrastructure as a business. We just pay everybody internally as we go through those channels. Now, that might not make sense to every single person, right? So not every person will want to have like a Lightning channel that they maintain that costs them like a few grand a year in order to buy coffee. So there is an upper limit on the number of channels that you might get on the Lightning network on top of Bitcoin, just because of the block size and the 10-minute blocks that we have. That's somewhere in the region of 20 million Lightning channels that we're likely to have. So it could be that there's just 20 million banks or 20 million businesses that use this, and we could scale to that point. There's also other technologies that are coming along, particularly around covenants, that will allow you to then start to almost like share all of those UTXOs. So instead of it being like me and you are just in the same bank and the bank has a Lightning channel, and it's okay because we can choose from one of 7,000 banks in Australia as opposed to one of 4. So then free market competition provides the decentralization that we're after. Instead of that, maybe it's that like we're in a particular bank where every claim that we have inside that bank can now be tracked back to a secret that we own, and they can't steal from us. Like, that would be pretty good scaling layers. That's kind of the idea behind something like Arc. Is it's kind of like a custodian that can't steal from you. I don't know if they'd like me saying that. I think they like to avoid the use of the word custodian, but I think to me, it's almost inevitable that you end up with about 20 million custodians, but it really matters like what those custodians can and can't do to you. Like right now in the world, we have effectively about 20 custodians, as far as I can tell. It's all, everything's just a derivative of the US central bank, seemingly. So maybe we've only got one sort of thing, but 20 million people that can all operate independently, and you can move freely between them, and anybody else can compete, is probably pretty solid levels of decentralization. And then, do you need to run all the infrastructure? Well, you always can. That's always going to be an option. The question is it going to make sense to do it from a work point of view, and is it going to make sense to do it from a cost point of view? As I say, my guess is you end up, roughly speaking, with about 20 million banks. And those banks then, I think, will use various technologies from Cashew to Fedimints to ARCs to just provide different trust levels of service for the settlement inside those systems. Now, something like eCash works very nicely with AIs because eCash is just data. It's like literally just a string of nonsense letters. And if you have that string of nonsense letters, you have the money. So they can just very easily and very quickly just be streaming strings of text around the internet, and that pays for any services that they consume, and they can get those strings back and swap them and final settle them very quickly. We can do a lot of stuff offline without waiting for feedback. That's also pretty amazing tech. So I'm fine that Bitcoin can scale to these levels. Like, I actually do think that the AI is likely to push those scaling levels quicker than the people. Like, I think it will be I think it'll be much easier to onboard 1 billion AI agents that all use Bitcoin to trade with each other than it would be to onboard 1 billion people. But I think once you onboard 1 billion AI agents that have an economy that trades entirely on Bitcoin, everybody is going to be using Bitcoin by paying for the AI agents to go and own the Bitcoin, and then they're trading amongst themselves to deliver the services. So it might just drag us into that world.
That's pretty cool, and that's probably a pretty cool outcome if it happens. Do you think it's going to be built on Lightning or Liquid? Like, is Lightning going to be the thing, or is it going to be something else? Like, you're associated with Fedi Bitcoin earlier. I didn't know very little about Fedi mints and stuff. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. But like, is Lightning the go-to? Is that where the most amount of conversation is?
It's like I did a talk, I think this is on YouTube somewhere, from BTC Prague, where I kind of tried to analogize difference between something like Lightning and Fedi mints. Is that like Lightning is roads, and Fedi mints, custodians, Arc, all these things are effectively like cities, towns, and villages, right? And it was like, you could imagine, like, same with self-custody stuff as well, like on-chain self-custody. On-chain self-custody is like your big comfy manor house that you have. Like, it's your own domain. You're off in the middle of nowhere. Nobody necessarily knows where you are. You've got your guard dogs around you and nobody can get in. It's just you there. But it's a very expensive place to have something like this available to you. But if you've got it, fantastic. Lightning is like the roads that you would use to go somewhere else, because it's all about like transactions and transaction batching, the amount of times that you would go. So I think Lightning exists in all these worlds. And then the question is, what are the different places where your Bitcoin is going to exist in between? So another place that your Bitcoin could exist is a custodian, like a wallet of Satoshi, right? And wallet of Satoshi, yes, it uses Lightning, but the Bitcoin that it holds aren't in a Lightning channel. Well, some of them are, but not all of them. Like, a lot of it would just be held in cold storage that it manages. So there's one of the places is your cold storage, which is like your big your big country manor. And then this other place is like Wallet of Satoshi. Wallet of Satoshi is probably a little bit like a city. Maybe because we don't know what tech they're using, it's like a Chinese city where you can be surveilled around everything that's going on inside there. I don't believe they do, but it's possible because it's really just a database of entries. So they hold all the Bitcoin, but you could go there. And if you go there, you can do a lot of things. Like, if you go to a Chinese city, there's a lot of stuff you can do. You can buy stuff, you can sell stuff, you can do things. Things might be cheap, they might be expensive. You might not put all of your money over there. You might put a bit of your money over there because you don't quite trust that it's being seen. But it's a different place where it could go, and Lightning is a way that you can then go from there somewhere else. And the other person could be a city, right? And like, let's say there's another city over here, and this is like a good solid Texas city that doesn't surveil you and has laws against that sort of shit, and that's like a Fedi mint. And it's like, okay, well, this one is a place where when you go into this city, nobody knows what's going on. Like, we don't know who you are. We don't know that you're definitely in there or not. And if you're in there, we don't know how much money you've got in there. That's like what a Fedi mint would do. But it can talk to this city. So you could send money from your Chinese city to this special magic city over here where nobody knows what's going on. And it would travel over Lightning. So I think you will always have Lightning is going to be these different places. It's going to allow you to move between different places. Like, the other way you could do it is like with an on-chain transaction. It's also a road, but it's like a road with a horse and carriage, let's say. Or maybe that's the wrong way of doing it. Maybe it's like it's a big, solid, like armored car that goes very slowly. Whereas Lightning is like just firing it on an aeroplane through the sky. It goes really quick. Maybe that's the right analogy for this. But Lightning and on-chain transactions can move you between the places. Lightning, you're kind of getting batched in with a lot of other transactions, so it can be very quick and very cheap on that transactional level. But what matters for the Lightning, cost of the Lightning transactions, is how much does it cost to keep this channel open between these two entities. So if this could also be you, like, there's nothing to stop you running a Lightning node. And right now, it won't cost you that much. Maybe it costs you like a few grand to buy all the bits, to load it up with Bitcoin, to open all the channels, and to run it for like 5 years or something like that. And you might say, look, well, from this node, I'm going to spend $1 million. So if it costs me $5,000, well, that's actually quite a low percentage fee compared to using a credit card network. So I'm still quids in, even if it costs that much. If you're going to spend $1 million over 5 years and it costs you $500,000, then you're not spending enough money to make it worthwhile to run all that infrastructure yourself and to pay all those maintenance costs. But what you could do is you just, go and work together with a bunch of mates, and you get 10,000 of you into a Fedimint, and then you run it there. And you say, well, we'll have one Lightning node for the Fedimint. Now we average that cost across 10,000 people. Well, now if it costs, $10,000, $1 million, even $1 million, right? It comes back down to like, will that be like $100, $1,000 like per year? Well, okay, we're back into reasonable amounts of money again.
Yeah.
Now, because we're putting so much like economic value across the Lightning network that it doesn't matter because we're sharing it across 10,000 people. So the way I see scaling is you're going to see a lot more interesting ways to share Lightning channels. So Lightning will deal with moving between places. And we already do. This is already what the Lightning network looks like. You're moving between either a place that you own or a place that you share with other people. And the problem with using like custodians is that you don't really have any rights. So right now it's like the Lightning network is a network of Chinese cities with the odd private homestead in the middle that runs its own like Lightning nodes. And then what you really want is a set of like just cities that can't steal from you, or cities that can't see what you're doing, or something like this, where there's a lot higher level of anonymity between things. And I think that's how you solve scaling in a pragmatic way. And it's also kind of a fractal of just how we solve scaling in human society in general, which is that you go and do, your secure stuff you put over there in the country home with the guard dogs and the walls. And then when you want to do stuff and trade a lot and be a bit more anonymous and have a bit of fun, you come over here to a different city, right? If you want to go and shoot a cow with a bazooka, you go to Cambodia because they do that sort of stuff there. So you go to the place to do the thing and then you come back. But if I'm going to go to Cambodia, I don't take everything that I own to Cambodia. I just take some of the stuff that I might need. In the same way, if I went into a custodian, I might use custodians in the future for certain payments, but I might just take what I need to do that. There's a thing that I'm trying to accomplish, and I will just go to the place. If I want to be anonymous and gamble, I go to Vegas. There's always going to be casinos and exchanges and offshore shit and gambling. Like, it's a thing that will exist. They'll just have a Lightning channel in the future. Binance has a Lightning channel. Vegas already has a Lightning channel, right? Binance is digital Vegas. So
yeah, Binance and Coinbase, any of the centralized exchanges. It's gambling. Pete, mate, that's the whole conversation. A little bit of information overload for myself, but maybe it's just triggered off so much because I have been going down this path of streamlining processes. And I guess to clarify, because some people would have picked it out, is I'm using AI to learn how to automate tasks. I'm not so much embedding AI or AI agents at this stage. It's sort of what you're saying. But, the business model of the century is to turn $10 into $50. It is going to be AI, Bitcoin, and Nostr. Do you have any final thoughts to be able to put a dot point or a period at the end of this conversation? We can pick it up again.
Oh, I think that's the goal. I mean, maybe to underline that, I'll just mention like one of the surprising things I think for a lot of people when I'm talking about like stack work is I'll say, oh, great. Like, how can I buy this? Can I use this? And the answer is no, we don't sell it, which is just different. A lot of people are like, what do you mean you don't sell it? How are you supposed to make any money? And it's like, well, if you think through like the length of a sales cycle that you might need to sell somebody on the idea that you could save them like $50 million and you had high confidence that you could do that, the answer isn't to sell them the software that does that. It's to go and buy the business and do it yourself. So that would be that.
That's, dude, power to you. Super cool. Thanks so much for your time. I'll put your X account below. Should we send people anywhere else to be able to follow you, check you out? He also gigolos on the side, ladies and gentlemen.
There's a rule about how many buttons you're allowed on your shirt, and I don't make the rule. I just enforce it.
I like it. Yeah, we'll definitely chuck your Nostr in there. I do believe you are one of the people I am following on Nostr as well. Cool. Thanks very much.